Hi, this is Joel Hathaway. I'm the Director of Alumni and Career Services here at Covenant Theological Seminary. Welcome to this series of interviews that we're doing with many of our Doctor of Ministry graduates. As you hear from these Doctor of Ministry graduates, you're going to hear a lot of the ways in which that particular program, above and beyond their Master of Divinity, really helped prepare them for the unique ministries to which the Lord ultimately called them. So today I'm talking to Al Lutz. He did his Master of Divinity here at Covenant Theological Seminary starting in 58 and graduated in 61. Then he came back in 1980 and began his Doctor of Ministry program. And his dissertation is called Covenant Theology and the God-Centered School in the Presbyterian Church in America. Al, glad to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Al Lutz. I was born 83 years ago and enrolled at Covenant Seminary 60 years ago this fall.
Al, tell me just a little bit about how did you come to know the Lord? When did you begin growing in the sense of call into pastoral ministry?
Fumbled all the way through high school, and I was always going to be a farm kid. But in my senior year, the Des Moines Register, which gave 12 scholarships a year out of 2,000 carriers, gave me a scholarship. I had no scholarship or no leadership, so it was obviously the Lord's blessing, which prompted me to go to Iowa State University, majored in forestry, got a commission in the Army. Even though a Christian going into the Army, I thought, here's my chance to get lost in the world of sin for a couple of years. But the Lord was gracious, and instead of the 7th biggest Army bases to go, I ended up in Fort Huachuca, Arizona, out in the boondocks. But down there, I started going to chapel to lead music and do solo work. And came in the ministry of Chaplain John McGregor, who was one of the early BP, EPRP, PCA chaplains. And under his ministry, I saw a man who believed the Bible, preached it, lived it, which prompted me to commit my life to Christ for the ministry. And so he said, of course, I was brought up in the USA Church, and he said, well, Covenant Seminary's just gotten started. So he suggested that I consider Covenant. So I applied, and behold, was admitted.
So Al, tell me a little bit about how did you begin this particular research on Christian schools?
We were married in 58, and our son was born, Stephen Lutz was born in 1960, year afterward. So when he got ready to go to school, I said, well, he will go to the public school. And my wife said, because of her connection with Conal Christian School, Max Bell said, we better check something else. And he was transported across town, half-hour drive each way, to an independent Baptist Christian school. Again, to get the eyes open up, and 3 years later, our daughter was married. So that next fall, we started Shannon Forest Christian School. So it's quite interesting that I was quite opposed to the Christian schools, and began to find out what the Scripture taught and what kind of vows I took when we had our children covenant baptized, that we were willing to take advantage of the covenant promise, but I had to learn to be obedient to the covenant promise, to bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And I realized quickly that not only meant the home, but also the church, the school, weekday school, because that's where they spent their time, that's where they met their peers, that's where they spent all of their energies, that's where they're sitting under the authority of teachers. I did my Doctor of Ministry, and with the title Covenant Theology and the God-Centered School in the PCA. And that's why I did this little charting a path through life of serving instrument. The plumb bob in serving has to be on the benchmark, a fixed point, fixed elevation. But in this case, the plumb bob is on the Bible. And then with a little illustration, home, church, and school, 3 institutions that God has ordained for bringing up children. Really, to me, this is one of the things that I wrote this paper to distribute was I really wanted pastors and people to see if you're going to claim the covenant promise, there needs to be a commitment to obey that promise.
So Al, when I'm looking at your dissertation, it seems like you really did some research on education. Talk to me a little bit about your approach to your research on education.
There wasn't much done in Christian schools. The Catholics had schools, which I was not in favor of. Missouri Synod Lutherans did. And, but somehow I noticed that the EPC, the RPCES, and then into the PCA, that seemed to be a low priority. And so I thought, you know, if I'm going to do a DMin, I think this might be my topic.
Huh. There's a substantial section of your dissertation where you focus on the theological component, foundation, if you will, for Christian education.
First of all, what is the theology of the scriptures for parents and their children? And then what is the biblical basis for training, which I ended up with Psalm 1, which talked about, first verse says, here's the thing you don't want to do. Walk in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stand in the way of the sinners, nor sit in the seat of God glorified. That person will not be blessed. So I found out from Psalm 1, it goes from walk to stand to sit, tell me, show me, indoctrinate me, leaving God out, becoming a practical sinner, becoming a mocker, a student, or entertainment, or government, whatever it might be, sits under that kind of teaching and will not be blessed.
So that's Psalm 1, and that talks about the unrighteous. Talk to me about the righteous, about the Christian, the Christ follower.
So blessed is the man, woman, or child, particularly student, who walks in the counsel of the godly, who stands in the way of the righteous, who sits in the seat of the God glorifier. He will be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. Mm. And then in my paper, I point out 13 objections to Christian schools, and those objections answered.
I'm curious if you'd tell me what maybe the primary or the greatest objection is, and then how would you normally answer that?
The first, number one objection is that I want my children to be a influence for Christ in the public setting. But a good objection, however, children are not called upon to do a grown-up's work.
That ties into your dissertation. You talk about Moses and Daniel as exceptions to people who spend most of their lives in, if you will, pagan cultures or outside of the Israeli culture. Talk to me a little bit about Moses and Daniel, what makes them different or unique, and how do you understand those texts?
Moses was a little baby put in a bulrush basket. And lo and behold, the Pharaoh's daughter comes along and says, wow, that's that little boy. And Miriam, his sister, is there. And she says, Miriam says, would you like for me to find somebody to take care of me? She said, yes. So Miriam went and got her mother, Moses' mother. And so I point out that Moses was homeschooled until he was maybe 12 years of age. He was homeschooled in Pharaoh's house. And of course, later on, he was thoroughly indoctrinated in all the Egyptian language and philosophy and culture. But when the crucial time came, because of that solid training, he said, I choose to suffer the afflictions of Christ around the world. The other example is Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You notice there how much secular culture expected. We don't remember their Jewish names. Mm-hmm. We just remember their Babylonian names. But see, they were teenagers that instructed at home. And then because of war, that's when they were carried away. And trained in Babylonian, but they stood their ground because of their firm foundation.
Al, thank you so much. there's so much more here in your dissertation that I want people to be aware of. And your dissertation is available in the Covenant Theological Seminary Library. If you're interested in the Doctor of Ministry program and finding out how that program is unique and different from the Master of Divinity, and also intending to equip you for the unique call that the Lord has called you to in your context, please call me or contact me. I'd be glad to tell you about upcoming courses that are available and how you can get registered for those at Covenant Seminary. Thank you so much, and continue watching for other videos, interviews with our Doctor of Ministry graduates.